My girlfriend of 7 years watched a flashy sales director flick a single $1 bill at my face like I was a beggar, just to show he could. The worst part? She didn't defend me. She laughed and put that dollar in her pocket. That night, I didn't throw a punch. I didn't cause a scene. I'm a former Army signal intelligence officer working in cybersecurity, so I know that noise is weakness and silence is a weapon. I picked up that dollar, went to work, and started auditing his digital footprint. I found the one illegal secret he was hiding in the company servers. He thought he bought my dignity for a buck, but 6 weeks later, I made sure that specific dollar cost him his freedom, his reputation, and his entire future. Here is exactly how I legally dismantled a bully's life without ever saying a word. In the world of signals intelligence, we are trained to prioritize the noise floor. You don't look for the explosion. You look for the silence before it, the subtle anomaly in the static that suggests a perimeter has been compromised. My name is Mark, and for the last 10 years, first in the Army Signal Corps, now in cybersecurity for a mid-tier fintech firm in Boston, I have lived my life in the background. I build the firewalls that keep the data safe. I monitor the traffic. I ensure that when the flashy sales directors on the 30th floor scream about their quarterly bonuses, the infrastructure beneath their feet doesn't collapse. I am disciplined, invisible, and operational. I thought my relationship with Emily was built on the same architecture, secure, encrypted, and redundant. I was wrong. Emily and I had been a unit for 7 years. We met before the corporate money started rolling in, back when we were just two kids splitting rent in a drafty apartment in Somerville. Now, we were circling the runway of marriage, but never quite landing the plane. She worked in marketing, 2 floors above my secure server rooms. Lately, I had noticed a drift. It was nothing overt, just a change in frequency. She stopped wearing the sensible coats I bought her and started buying heels that clicked too loudly on the marble lobby floors. She started talking about alignment and vision and networking. I stayed steady. I provided stability. I thought stability was the asset she valued most. But in the current market of our relationship, I was trading sideways, and she was looking for a volatile spike. That spike was Tyler. Tyler was the newly appointed regional sales director. He was everything I was not: high amplitude, chaotic, and obsessed with surface-level optics. He wore Italian suits that cost more than my first car and walked through the office with the kind of aggressive confidence that usually masks a deep incompetence. He didn't understand the systems I built. He just sold the illusion of them. To him, I was just it support, Sabrunt in the basement. To Emily, however, he was a signal flare in a boring sky. The incident that shattered my life happened on a Friday in late November. The company had just closed a massive portfolio deal, and the celebration moved to a high-end bar in the Seaport district. The air inside was thick with the smell of expensive cologne, gin, and desperation. It was the kind of place where a beer costs $15, and the lighting is dim enough to hide moral ambiguity. I stood at the edge of the group, nursing a domestic lager, watching the room. My back was to the wall, a habit from my deployment days. I watched the vectors of conversation. Everyone was orbiting Tyler. He held court in the center of the booth, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up to reveal a heavy Rolex. He was buying rounds of tequila, shouting toasts, and physically dominating the space. Emily was sitting next to him. Not across from him, next to him. Her body language was tilted entirely in his direction, her laugh arriving a fraction of a second too quickly after his jokes. I analyzed the data in real time. Proximity, too close. Eye contact, sustained. Defensive posture, 0. I decided to extract us. I finished my drink and walked over to the table, placing a hand gently on Emily's shoulder. "It's getting late," I said, my voice low and level. "I'm going to close out our tab." The table went quiet. Tyler looked up, his eyes glassy with alcohol and arrogance. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. It was a predator assessing prey. "Leaving so soon, soldier?" Tyler asked, his voice booming over the ambient bass of the music. "The night is young, and the bonus pool is deep." "We have an early morning," I said, keeping my tone neutral. I reached for the leather bill folder the waitress had just set down. Tyler's hands shot out and clamped over mine. His grip was clammy. "Don't embarrass yourself, Mark. I've got the company card. Put your allowance away." "I pay for my own drinks," I stated. It was a rule. I didn't owe people like Tyler anything. Tyler laughed, a sharp, barking sound. He pulled his hand back and dug into his pocket, pulling out a thick money clip. He peeled off a single $1 bill. He didn't hand it to me. He didn't place it on the table. He looked me dead in the eye and flicked it. The movement was dismissive, a wrist snap like he was discarding a wrapper. The paper bill fluttered through the air, hit me square in the chest, and slid down my shirt before landing on the sticky bar top. It was a calculated, kinetic strike, a public declaration that my financial worth was zero. The table froze. The disrespect was absolute. In a military context, this was an act of war. I didn't flinch. I didn't swing. I stood perfectly still, my heart rate spiking but my face remaining a mask of cold discipline. I looked at the dollar, then at Tyler. Oops, Tyler smirked. Then, he did something worse. He reached out, picked up that same dollar bill from the bar, folded it into a crisp triangle, and slid it into Emily's hand. Here, sweetheart, Tyler said, loud enough for the entire marketing team to hear. A tip for putting up with the frugal guy. Go buy yourself a gumball. The silence stretched for 1 second, 2 seconds. I looked at Emily. I waited for the defense. I waited for her to throw the dollar back, to slap him, to say, "Don't talk to him like that." Instead, she looked at the dollar in her hand, then she looked at Tyler, and then she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a genuine, intoxicated giggle of submission to his power. She closed her fingers around the dollar bill. That was the moment the structure collapsed. The woman I had planned a future with had just accepted payment for my humiliation. I saw the reality clearly, stripped of all sentimentality. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was a deprecated asset she was waiting to offload. I looked at her, and she finally made eye contact with me. The laughter died in her throat, replaced by a flash of shame. But she didn't let go of the money. She didn't stand up. She stayed seated in Tyler's gravity well. "Okay," I said. The word came out soft, final. I reached out and took the dollar bill from her hand. She didn't resist. I smoothed the paper out, folded it neatly, and placed it into my wallet. I didn't throw it back at Tyler. I didn't scream. I treated it like evidence at a crime scene. I was logging the incident. Time, 23:42. Location, the seaport. Event, betrayal confirmed. "Have a good night," I said to the table. I turned and walked out of the bar, moving with the precision of a man who has just initiated a new operation. The cold Boston air hit my face outside, but it didn't feel as cold as the void opening up inside my chest. I hailed a cab, sat in the back, and stared at the city lights blurring past. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I began to formulate a plan. The breach had occurred, and now it was time to assess the damage and prepare the countermeasures. The ride home from the seaport was a study in suffocating silence. We sat in the back of an Uber, separated by 6 inches of vinyl seat that felt like 6 miles of demilitarized zone. I watched the rain streak against the window, the neon lights of Boston blurring into jagged lines of red and white. I was waiting for an apology. I was waiting for Emily to say, "I can't believe he did that," or, "I'm sorry I didn't back you up." Instead, she launched a preemptive strike. "You were so stiff tonight," she said, her voice tight, staring straight ahead at the driver's headrest. "You made everything incredibly awkward, Mark." I turned to look at her, my internal gyroscope tilting. "I made it awkward?" "He threw a dollar at my face, Emily. He treated me like a beggar." "He was just being Tyler," she snapped, finally looking at me. Her eyes were hard, defensive. "That is just how alpha sales guys joke. You are always so serious. You take everything so personally. It is exhausting." I recognized the tactic immediately. In psychological warfare, this is called gaslighting, altering the perception of reality to destabilize the target. She was rewriting the narrative of the evening to justify her own cowardice. If I was the boring, insecure guy, then her flirting with the fun, rich guy wasn't betrayal. It was just a natural market correction. I didn't argue. You cannot argue with a compromised system. I just engaged the silence again, letting the dead air between us do the heavy lifting. Over the next 3 weeks, the silence metastasized. I began to observe the pattern of her drift with the detachment of a counterintelligence officer. The signs were subtle, disguised as routine updates, but the anomalies were glaring if you knew where to look. First, the operational security, OPSEC, around her phone tightened. For 7 years, her phone had lived face up on the coffee table. Now it was always face down. When a notification buzzed, she would flinch, pick it up, and angle the screen away from me. She changed her passcode. I saw her thumb trace a new pattern, a complex Z shape instead of the old L shape. Then came the physical evidence. She started coming home late, blaming strategy sessions for the upcoming quarter. When she walked through the door at 9 p.m., she didn't smell like the office stale air or the subway. She smelled of gin, expensive steak, and a cologne that wasn't mine, something musky, aggressive, and lingering. It was the scent of a man who marks his territory. At work, the torture was visual. Our office has an open-plan architecture designed for transparency, which now served as a theater for my humiliation. I would look up from my triple monitor setup in the security corner and see them in the glass-walled conference rooms. Tyler would be leaning back in his chair, feet on the table, laughing. Emily would be leaning in, her posture open, receptive, mirroring his movements. They looked like a binary system, orbiting each other, while I was just a legacy server running in the basement necessary for operations but invisible to the users. I became a ghost in my own relationship. I stopped asking, "How was your day?" because I already knew the answer. Her day was Tyler. The final disconnect happened on a Sunday morning in December. The sky outside was a flat slate gray. I was drinking black coffee in the kitchen. Emily walked in, fully dressed. She wasn't wearing her Sunday sweatpants. She was wearing jeans and boots. She looked like she was ready to travel. "We need to talk," she said. The tone was clinical, rehearsed. She sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping her distance. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She conducted the breakup like a performance review for an employee she was letting go. "I feel like we are misaligned," she started, using the corporate buzzwords that Tyler loved. "You are safe, Mark. You are incredibly stable. But I need growth. I need someone who challenges my trajectory. We are just stagnant." "Is his name Tyler?" I asked. My voice was flat, devoid of the tremor she probably expected. She paused, caught off guard by the directness of the question. Then she lifted her chin, a gesture of defiance. "Yes, we have been seeing each other. With him it feels like there is infinite possibility. He has this energy, this vision for the future. You are always so worried about risk, about saving, about the perimeter. He lives in the world, Mark. You just watch it." "I watch it, so I don't get blindsided," I said quietly. "Like I am right now." "I'm sorry," she said, standing up. "I'm moving out today. My friends are coming in an hour." The efficiency of the extraction was brutal. She had planned this logistics operation weeks ago. By noon, the apartment was stripped. The books were gone. The decorative pillows were gone. The space where her life had intersected with mine was now just negative space. She left behind only the debris she deemed valueless, a tangled mess of old phone chargers, a half-used bottle of shampoo, and a gray sweater she used to wear when she was sick. When the door clicked shut for the last time, the sound echoed like a gunshot in a canyon. I sat on the floor of the empty living room. The silence was absolute. The pain hit me then, not as a wave of tears, but as a crushing pressure in my chest, a physical weight. I had invested 7 years of equity into this partnership, and I had been liquidated for a newer model with better marketing. But as the sun went down and the shadows stretched across the floor, something inside me shifted. The heartbreak began to calcify into something colder, harder. I switched my internal operating mode from partner to operator. Crying would not fix the breach. Anger would not recover the lost assets. Only intelligence could resolve this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the $1 bill. The paper was wrinkled now, the edges soft. I smoothed it out on the floorboards. Tyler had used this piece of paper to buy my girlfriend and destroy my dignity. He had sold Emily a story of unlimited wealth, power, and possibility. He had projected an image of a high-value asset. But I worked in fintech. I knew that the loudest stocks were often the most overleveraged. I knew that aggressive expansion often hid structural rot. I looked at the dollar bill and made a decision. I wasn't going to fight him for her heart. That territory was already lost. I was going to audit him. I was going to dig into the digital bedrock of his life and see if the foundation was real concrete or just cheap plaster painted gold. I stood up, pocketed the dollar, and walked to my computer. It was time to go to work. I returned to the office on Monday morning with a sensation that was entirely new to me. The heavy, crushing weight of heartbreak had not disappeared, but I had successfully compartmentalized it. In the military, we called this mission focus. You do not ignore the wound. You simply tourniquet the limb and keep firing. My apartment was empty, a hollow shell where a life used to be, but my workspace was crowded with data. This was my domain. This was the one place where Tyler's charisma and Emily's justifications could not alter the truth. In the digital world, there are no opinions, only logs. My official job title was Senior Cybersecurity Analyst. My mandate was to protect the company from external threats, hackers in Eastern Europe, phishing bots, denial of service attacks. But that morning, I turned my sensors inward. I initiated a deep dive audit of internal traffic, specifically targeting the high-frequency trading logs of the Northeast Sales Division. I told myself it was routine anomaly detection. I was lying. It was a targeted manhunt. I sat in the glow of my 3 monitors, the hum of the server racks behind me providing a white noise sanctuary. I began by pulling the metadata for the last 2 quarters. I was looking for patterns that did not fit the organic rhythm of business. Real financial growth looks like a jagged line. It struggles, it dips, it climbs. It is messy. Tyler's performance charts, however, were too smooth. They were mathematically perfect, ascending at a 45-degree angle that defied market volatility. I started digging into the transaction layers. That is when I saw the ghosts. At first glance, the volume looked impressive. Millions of dollars were flowing into the high-yield growth portfolios that Tyler managed. But when I cross-referenced the source IP addresses and the routing numbers, the picture shifted. I noticed a cluster of accounts that were behaving strangely. Account A would transfer $50,000 to account B. 2 days later, account B would transfer $49,000 to account C. Then account C would transfer the funds back to a holding shell connected to account A. It was a classic wash trading scheme, modernized for the digital age. Tyler was not bringing in new clients. He was taking existing capital, spinning it through a carousel of shell accounts to simulate high transaction volume, and then booking the new deposits as fresh sales wins. He was essentially moving the same stack of money from his left pocket to his right pocket and charging the company a commission for the effort. It was a house of cards built on churn. He was inflating the company's stock price and his own bonus checks with air. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the cold blue light of the screen reflecting in my eyes. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just a bad boyfriend. He was a financial criminal. He was risking the entire firm, the jobs of 300 people, the retirement funds of our actual clients, just to lease a Lamborghini and buy admiration he didn't deserve. Then, I found the connection that turned my cold analysis into a fresh, hot wound. I traced the file paths of the monthly reports that concealed this fraud. These numbers had to be presented to the board, packaged in slick, beautiful slides that made the lie look like genius. I looked at the metadata of the PowerPoint presentations titled Q4 Strategic Wins. Author: Emily Jensen. Last modified. Yesterday, 11:42 p.m. I stared at her name on the screen. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the nights she had come home late, smelling of his cologne. She had been sitting in his office, side by side with him, building the very camouflage that hid his crimes. She was taking his dirty, laundered numbers and polishing them into marketing gold. I knew, logically, that she probably didn't understand what she was looking at. She was in marketing, not compliance. To her, these were just great metrics that her ambitious boyfriend had achieved. She believed in the fairy tale. She had left a stable, honest man to become the propaganda minister for a fraudster. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical puncture. She wanted growth and possibility, and she had found it in a Ponzi scheme. My finger hovered over the escalate to compliance button. It would be so easy. One click, and an automated flag would be sent to the chief risk officer. An investigation would start. Tyler would be pulled into a meeting, but I pulled my hand back. I stopped. I thought like an operator. If I reported this now, through standard channels, what would happen? Tyler was the golden boy. He was the top revenue generator. The company needed his numbers to look good for the upcoming investor retreat. If I sent a simple red flag, the executives might bury it. They might fire me for unauthorized snooping, or worse, They might let Tyler resign quietly, with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement, allowing him to fail upwards to another company, taking Emily with him. No, that was not acceptable. A standard report was a slap on the wrist. I needed a kinetic strike. I needed to dismantle him so completely that there would be no possibility of reconstruction. I needed a kill chain, a military concept where you identify, track, target, engage, and assess. I realized then that Tyler was not just a jerk, he was a liability. He had planted a bomb in the foundation of our company. He thought he was untouchable because he controlled the narrative. But he had forgotten one thing. Narratives are soft. Data is hard. I decided not to defuse the bomb. Instead, I decided to take control of the detonator. I would let him build his tower of lies as high as possible. I would let him gather the biggest audience he could find, and then, at the moment of maximum exposure, I would trigger the collapse. I minimized the window, hiding the evidence deep inside a secure, encrypted folder on my private drive. I picked up my coffee, which had gone cold. I took a sip and felt a strange calm settle over me. The heartbreak was still there, but it was no longer a weakness. It was fuel. I was not just the ex-boyfriend anymore. I was the insider threat. In any theater of conflict, the rules of engagement, ROE, determine the legitimacy of the strike. If you violate them, you go from being a soldier to a war criminal. In the corporate world, the line is even thinner. If I hacked Tyler's personal email or installed a keylogger on his laptop, I would be the villain. I would be the disgruntled ex-boyfriend committing a felony. Any evidence I found would be inadmissible, fruit of the poisonous tree. He would walk free, and I would go to federal prison. So, I established my own ROE. Absolute legality. I would not break a single law. I would not cross a single firewall that I wasn't already authorized to cross. I was going to weaponize compliance. I was going to use the very bureaucracy he mocked to strangle him. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the quiet, reliable guy in the server room, resetting passwords and patching software. By night, I was building a dossier that would rival a federal indictment. I treated the data collection like a sniping operation, slow, deliberate, and invisible. I started by archiving the logs. Every time Tyler's accounts executed a wash trade moving money in a circle to simulate volume, I took a digital snapshot. I exported the raw CSV files, timestamped them, and hashed them so their integrity couldn't be questioned later. But raw numbers are dry. They don't tell a story that makes a jury or a board of directors angry. I needed to connect the fraud to the arrogance. I found the link on Instagram. Tyler lived his life for the audience. His profile was public, a curated gallery of the hustle, and there in every recent photo was Emily. I pulled up a trade log from last Tuesday. It showed a massive, complex transfer of funds executed from Tyler's terminal ID at 8:45 p.m. According to the system, he was in the office, closing a major deal with a European partner. I opened Instagram. I scrolled to last Tuesday. There was a photo posted by Emily at 8:50 p.m. Location: oh yeah, the most expensive sushi bar in Boston. The caption: celebrating big wins with my favorite guy. Number power couple. In the photo, Tyler was holding a glass of sake, smiling at the camera. His hands were nowhere near a computer. The correlation was damning. He had set up an automated script, a bot, to execute fake trades while he was out spending the commission money those fake trades generated. He was stealing from the company to buy the dinner he was eating. And Emily, my Emily, was the unwitting alibi, posting the proof of his negligence for the world to see. I took a screenshot of the trade. I took a screenshot of the Instagram post. I placed them side by side in a PDF file titled Exhibit A. It was a perfect juxtaposition of greed and stupidity. It hurt to look at her smile, a smile that used to be mine, directed at a thief. But I didn't look away. I used the pain. Pain is just data that tells you something is wrong. I converted it into focus. Once the evidence package was complete, I needed a delivery mechanism. I couldn't just email the CEO. He played golf with Tyler. The boys' club would protect its own. I needed a channel that couldn't be silenced. I turned my attention to internal audit. The head of the audit department was a man named Kevin, a gray, exhausted man who worked in a windowless office near the loading dock. Sales guys like Tyler called him a buzzkill and ignored his emails. Kevin was the immune system of the company, but he was suppressed. I decided to wake him up. I didn't tell Kevin everything. I didn't want him to know this was a vendetta. I wanted him to think he was the hero. I started sending him automated, anonymous system health alerts. I tweaked the sensitivity of the fraud detection software just enough so that it would flag Tyler's specific account behaviors as potential glitches. I walked by Kevin's desk one afternoon. He was frowning at his screen, looking at one of the alerts I had triggered. "Rough day?" I asked, pausing with my coffee. "Just these weird variances in the Northeast sector," Kevin muttered, rubbing his eyes. "The volume doesn't match the liquidity." "That's odd," I said, keeping my voice casual, helpful. "You know, sometimes the automated scripts get stuck in a loop if the user isn't actually logged in. Have you checked the timestamp against the building access logs? See if the guy was even in the building?" Kevin looked at me. The gears turned. "No, I haven't." "Might be worth a look," I said, and walked away. I didn't need to do anything else. I had given the bloodhound the scent. Within 24 hours, I saw Kevin's network activity spike. He was digging. He was pulling the same threads I had already woven together. I had built the gun, and now I had placed it in the hands of the one man whose job was to pull the trigger. Now, I needed the kill zone. I saw the calendar invite for the annual strategic retreat in Stowe, Vermont. It was the biggest event of the year. The board of directors would be there. Major institutional investors were flying in, and crucial to my plan, 2 representatives from the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, were attending as observers for a potential IPO down the road. It was the perfect stage. High visibility, high stakes, 0 exit routes. Tyler was scheduled to give the keynote speech on Saturday morning, The Future of FinTech Sales. He was going to stand in front of the people who controlled his fate and lie to them for 45 minutes. I sat in my apartment on Friday night. It was quiet. I opened my laptop. I had compiled the master dossier. It contained everything. The wash trading logs, the IP mismatches, the Instagram alibis, the shell account structures, and the raw code of the bot he was using. It was 50 pages of irrefutable, career-ending truth. I opened the email client. I addressed the email to a distribution list I had created. Internal audit, general counsel, the board of directors, and as a blind copy, the SEC tip line. Subject: urgent, critical compliance, failure, Northeast Division. I didn't hit send. Sending it now would give them a night to panic, to spin the story, to call lawyers. I needed shock and awe. I located the scheduling tool. I set the delivery time for Saturday, 10:15 a.m. That was exactly 15 minutes into Tyler's keynote speech. Just enough time for him to get comfortable, to start bragging, to feel like the king of the world. The email would hit the phones of every decision maker in the room simultaneously. I hovered my mouse over the schedule button. I thought of the dollar bill he flicked at me. I thought of Emily laughing. I thought of the 7 years I spent building a life she walked away from for a mirage. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just executing a protocol. I clicked the mouse. Message scheduled. The trap was set. The payload was armed. Tomorrow, the world Tyler built on arrogance and fraud would meet the cold, hard wall of reality. The grand ballroom of the Stowe Mountain Lodge was designed to make people feel important. It was a cathedral of timber and glass, offering a panoramic view of the snow-covered peaks outside, while inside, the air was warm and smelled of roasted coffee and expensive perfume. This was the quarterly strategic retreat, a corporate ritual where the leadership team gathered to congratulate themselves on profits that hadn't yet materialized. I stood at the very back of the room, leaning against a pillar in the shadows. I was wearing my standard company fleece, blending into the background like a piece of utility furniture. No one looked at me. They were all looking at the stage. Tyler was in his element. He moved across the platform with the kinetic energy of a motivational speaker, clicking through slides that projected massive, soaring green arrows. He was wearing a navy suit that was tailored to the millimeter, and his voice boomed through the high-end sound system. "Innovation isn't just a word," Tyler announced, flashing his million-dollar smile. "It's a mindset. In the Northeast Division, we didn't just meet the market, we dictated it." In the front row, Emily sat with her back straight, radiating the proud anxiety of a politician's wife. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that looked elegant but terrified me. It was the kind of outfit bought on credit, an investment in a lifestyle that didn't actually exist. She clapped the loudest at his pauses. She looked at him with a mixture of adoration and relief, believing that her bet had paid off. She had traded the boring, safe signal officer for the high-flying captain of industry. I checked my watch. 10 hours, 14 minutes and 45 seconds. On the screen, Tyler pulled up the growth velocity chart, the very chart I knew was built on the wash trading algorithms I had archived. "Look at this trajectory," Tyler said, pointing a laser at the peak. "This is what happens when you refuse to take no for an answer." 10 hours, 15 minutes. The payload executed. It started as a ripple, a low-frequency disturbance in the room's acoustic profile. First, a phone chirped in the second row, the chief financial officer's iPad. Then, a vibration buzzed against a table surface near the general counsel. Then, a cascade of chimes, tings, and vibrations swept through the VIP section like a sudden downdraft. It wasn't a random scattering of texts, it was a synchronized arrival. I watched the heads go down. It was a beautiful, terrible wave of movement. The CFO, a stern woman named Helen, unlocked her tablet. I saw the blue light reflect on her glasses. She swiped, tapped, and then froze. Her posture shifted instantly from relaxed observer to predator. She leaned over to the CEO, showing him the screen. On stage, Tyler was still talking, oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. "We are projecting a Q1 increase of another 40%. The room had gone dead silent. The ambient chatter, the clinking of water glasses, it all stopped. The only sound was Tyler's voice, which suddenly sounded thin and desperate against the vacuum of the room. "Tyler," the CEO said. He didn't shout. He didn't use a microphone. He just spoke from his seat, his voice cutting through the air like a razor. "Stop!" Tyler paused, the clicker halfway to the next slide. He chuckled nervously. "Sorry, Bill? I'm just getting to the good part. Cut the feed." Helen, the CFO, ordered, looking toward the AV technician in the booth. The screen behind Tyler went black. The soaring green arrow vanished, leaving him standing in front of a blank gray void. "What is this?" Tyler laughed, spreading his arms, trying to charm the room. "Technical difficulties, guys? Mark, is this your department?" He tried to throw a joke my way, unaware that I was the architect of his funeral. Helen stood up. She didn't look at Tyler. She looked at the two men in the back corner, the SEC observers and the external legal counsel. She nodded once. "Tyler, step down from the stage," Helen said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Security is escorting you to the conference room. Now." "Excuse me." Tyler's smile faltered. The mask slipped. "I'm in the middle of a keynote. What is going on?" "We received the dossier," the CEO said, holding up his phone. "The wash trades, the shell accounts, the bot logs. It's all here, Tyler. Every single timestamp." The blood drained from Tyler's face so fast it looked like a hydraulic failure. He looked at the CEO, then at the blank screen, and finally, he looked at the crowd. He wasn't the alpha anymore. He was a fraud who had been caught naked. He started to stammer. That's context. You don't understand the liquidity strategy." Two men in dark suits, corporate security, walked up the stairs of the stage. They didn't touch him, but they flanked him. The visual was undeniable. He was being detained. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a reputation dying in real time. I shifted my gaze to the front row. Emily hadn't moved. She was staring at Tyler, her mouth slightly open. I watched the realization hit her like a physical blow. She looked at the man she had left me for the man who threw $1 in my face, and she saw him for what he really was. He wasn't a visionary. He was a liability. He was a criminal. The social currency she thought she had acquired was suddenly worthless. She looked around the room, seeing the disgust on the faces of the executives she had been trying to impress. She realized that by sitting next to him, by posting those photos, by building his slide decks, she was contaminated. She was part of the blast radius. Tyler was led off the stage, his legs looking wobbly, stripped of his swagger. As he passed the front row, he looked at Emily, silently begging for support. She recoiled. She actually pulled her legs back, physically distancing herself from the contagion. I unscrewed the cap of my water bottle and took a slow sip. The system had corrected itself. The anomaly had been purged. As the room erupted into the chaotic noise of crisis management, lawyers shouting, the board members making calls, I pushed off the pillar. I walked toward the exit doors at the back. Before I pushed the doors open, I felt eyes on me. I turned. Emily was standing up, looking back across the sea of panicked suits. She found me in the shadows. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of terror and sudden, clarifying regret. She looked at the chaos on stage, then back at me calm, standing firm, integrity intact. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't give her the satisfaction of anger. I just held her gaze for 1 second, acknowledging the data point. Lesson learned. Then I turned my back on the burning building and walked out into the cold, clean air of the mountain. The fallout was not a splash. It was a slow, grinding liquidation. In the weeks following the retreat, the company went into full damage control mode. The PR team spun the narrative, issuing press releases about robust internal auditing and zero tolerance for ethical breaches. They painted themselves as the heroes who caught the rogue element, conveniently ignoring that the rogue element had been their golden boy until the moment the stock price was threatened. Tyler didn't just lose his job, he was erased. The SEC investigation triggered a clawback clause in his contract. Every bonus, every commission, every unvested stock option he had accumulated over the last 2 years was frozen and repatriated to the firm. I watched from the window of the 4th floor as a flatbed tow truck winched his leased Lamborghini out of the executive parking lot. It looked smaller on the hook, just a piece of painted metal that nobody owned anymore. Rumors floated down from legal that he was facing federal wire fraud charges. He wasn't going to prison immediately, but he was entering a different kind of confinement. A life of legal fees, bankruptcy, and permanent reputational radioactive decay. I stayed in the shadows. I didn't take credit. I let internal audit accept the accolades. My victory wasn't in the applause, it was in the silence that followed the noise. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, I found Emily waiting for me. I walked out of my apartment building, heading to the gym. The Boston wind was cutting, carrying the biting chill of impending winter. She was standing near the curb, under the harsh yellow light of a street lamp. She wasn't wearing the sleek, backless dresses she had bought for Tyler's World. She was wearing her old coat, the gray wool one I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. It looked tired. She looked tired. The glamour was gone. The makeup was minimal, and her posture, usually so upright and ambitious, was slumped. She looked like a day trader who had lost the entire portfolio in a single afternoon. I stopped 5 feet away. I didn't close the distance. I established a perimeter. "Mark," she said. Her voice was thin, shivering slightly in the cold. "Emily," I replied. My tone was flat, the same voice I used to report server downtimes. She took a step forward, but my lack of movement stopped her. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I wanted to see you. I've been calling." "I blocked the number," I said. "It's standard protocol for compromised contacts." She flinched at the terminology. Tears began to well up in her eyes, not the hysterical tears of the breakup, but the heavy, exhausting tears of regret. "I didn't know, Mark. You have to believe me. I didn't know what he was doing with the accounts. I was caught up in it. He made everything sound so big. He manipulated me." She looked at me, pleading for the familiar warmth, the safety I had provided for 7 years. She wanted to dock her ship in the harbor I had built. "I miss us," she whispered. "I miss who we were before he ruined everything. Can't we just talk? Start over?" I looked at her, analyzing the request. Part of me, the old part, the sentimental part, wanted to comfort her, but the operator in me overrode the impulse. "He didn't ruin us, Emily," I said, my voice calm and deadly quiet. "You did." "I was tricked," she protested. "No," I corrected her. "You made a trade. You looked at my value stability, loyalty, quiet support, and you decided it was undervalued. Then you looked at Tyler, flashy, loud, high risk, and you thought he was the growth stock. You didn't leave because you were manipulated. You left because you thought you could do better." I paused, letting the cold wind fill the silence between us. "You failed to do your due diligence," I said. "You bought the hype without checking the fundamentals. And now that the market has crashed, you want to sell your shares back to me at the original price, but I'm not buying, Emily. That position is closed." She stood there stunned. The brutal, financial logic of my rejection hit her harder than any scream could have. She realized then that the boring man she left was not a fallback option. I was a fortress, and the drawbridge was up. "I'm sorry," she choked out. I felt like I was drowning." "You weren't drowning," I said. "You were floating. You just wanted to fly." I reached into the back pocket of my jeans and pulled out my wallet. It was an old leather bifold worn at the edges. I opened it and extracted a single, crisp object. The $1 bill. It was the same bill Tyler had flicked at my chest in the bar. The same bill he had tipped her with. The same bill she had laughed over. I had kept it pressed flat, a relic of the breach point. I took a step forward and held it out to her. She looked at the dollar, then up at my face, confusion clouding her teary eyes. Her hand trembled as she reached out and took it. "What is this?" she asked. "Return this to him," I said. I looked her dead in the eyes, transmitting one final message. "Tell him it was the most expensive dollar he ever spent." She stared at the bill in her hand, the weight of the irony crushing her. That single dollar had cost Tyler his career, his freedom, and his reputation. It had cost her the love of a good man and her own self-respect. It was the cheapest asset in the world, yet it carried the highest price tag. I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't wait for the breakdown. The mission was complete. The objective, reclaiming my dignity, was achieved. I walked past her. I didn't shoulder check her. I simply moved through the space she used to occupy. I walked down the street, my boots echoing rhythmically on the pavement. I didn't look back. In the movies, the hero looks back. In real life, the operator keeps moving toward the next extraction point. My life is different now. I left the firm 2 months later. I took a position as a lead security consultant for a defense contractor in D.C. The work is harder, the stakes are higher, and the silence is absolute. I am rebuilding my own perimeter, stronger this time, with better firewalls and zero-trust protocols. I don't hate Emily. I don't hate Tyler. I just view them as vulnerabilities that have been patched. They taught me that in love, as in cyber warfare, the greatest threats don't always break in through the front door, they get invited in. I walked into the night, the city noise fading behind me, finally understanding the lesson I had learned in the trenches of heartbreak. In a world of noise, silence is the most dangerous weapon. In the end, this story wasn't just about taking down a bad guy. It was about realizing that true worth isn't something you can flash in a bar or fake on a spreadsheet. I kept that dollar bill not because I was angry, but to remind myself that my dignity has no price tag. If you are going through a storm right now, remember this. Noise is weak, silence is strong, and you should never, ever let someone treat you like a backup plan in your own life. You are the architect of your own future, so build it with integrity that no one can tear down. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next operation. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to save your own self-respect? Let me know your story below. Also, we are building a global community here. Drop a comment telling me which state or city you are watching from right now. I'll see you in the next video.